I want to bring in Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Thank you very much for being with us. And I want to start with the word that 2 American hostages have been freed. What do you make of this move by Hamas? What's your initial impression?
Let me first say that we're relieved, and for the Raanan family and for Martin's family. I was on that broadcast earlier where he mentioned them both, and it was very moving, very disturbing. So relieved for that family, for Martin's family, for the Raanans. But we are also praying for the other hostages and hoping that they will be released. Having said that, Hamas is very smart. They released these 2 hostages, I think probably because Martin talked about them on the news, and also because they are Americans. And that makes makes headlines, certainly. They released a video of another hostage, Mia Sham, the other day, because she's a French-Israeli citizen, dual citizen, that had an impact in France. And so they're playing to a foreign audience. They notice they're not releasing people who do not have dual nationality or American or foreign nationality, and they are going to play for time. They're going to try to drive a wedge between Israel and its Western allies, particularly between Israel and its American allies, and play for time. And time is not what Israel has. We are at maximum mobilization in this country. About 360,000 soldiers have been mobilized. This is the most productive sector of our economy. These are young women and men in their 30s and 20s. And there's a limit for how long Israel can endure this. But beyond that, the people of Israel expect this army to go in and uproot and destroy Hamas for 3 very cogent and pressing reasons. One is that if we go back to the status quo ante, the southern part of the country, which is actually 62% of the country, will become uninhabitable. Nobody would go back and live there anymore. Secondly, we have to restore our deterrence power. Right now, who fears Israel in the Middle East right now? We are extremely vulnerable. We have to restore that deterrence power by uprooting Hamas. And the third point was the one I think that Martin articulated very eloquently and accurately, which is the covenant between the state of Israel and the people of Israel. This country was founded literally 3 years to the date after the Holocaust on the promise that it would protect the Jewish people from a second Holocaust. And that covenant has been deeply impaired, Aksav, if not shredded. And that has to be repaired as well. There is no way that covenant can be restored under the shadow of Hamas warheads. That has to end. So there really is no way that Israel cannot interact. I know there's maybe growing pressure on Israel to give more time for hostage release, give more time for Qatari mediators. Apparently the Qataris were involved in this mediation to release the Raanan mother and daughter. But we have our own clocks, and that clock is not going to tick indefinitely.
Let me ask you about the idea of the destruction of Hamas, because I was talking to Martin about the time I spent in Israel, and more than 20 years ago, I happened to have an interview with the co-founder of Hamas, Abdel al-Rantizi, and it happened to be on the same day that there was a bombing. Many university students died, including Americans. And I would say not only was he unapologetic in the interview we did just hours after that bombing, but he seemed...
I remember it well, yes. Mm-hmm.
Somewhat joyful. He seemed pleased that the idea that American students, innocent Americans, have died. Now, he ultimately was killed. But the question a lot of people have, is the destruction of Hamas possible? And that's the question I'm asking you now, Mr. Ambassador.
It's an excellent question. And we can destroy Hamas's military capabilities. We can certainly degrade its ranks of terrorists. We can kill its leaders. If you ask me whether Israel can kill the idea of Hamas, and I will say absolutely not. Because the idea of Hamas is the same idea of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, of Hezbollah. These are jihadist organizations that seek to create a caliphate in the Middle East, an extreme Islamic caliphate in the Middle East, and then to expand it to include the entire planet. That is their theology. It's not even an ideology. The only difference between Hamas and ISIS and Al-Qaeda is that Hamas seeks to create that caliphate first by destroying Israel. It's a staged issue. And that is why the issue in Gaza is completely really divorced from, say, the peace process with the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. It's very different. In fact, every time we have a peace process, and I go back, I was an advisor to Yitzhak Rabin in the early 90s, so I've been involved in just about every peace effort here, and I participated in the last round of negotiations with the Palestinians. Every time we tried to reach peace with the Palestinians, the Hamas comes out and not only kills us, they kill the Palestinians. And in taking over Gaza, Hamas threw several hundred Palestinians who were loyal to the Palestinian Authority, threw them off roofs. So they are anti-peace, and as would be ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So we cannot exterminate the idea, but together with our allies in the free-thinking world, we will work to defend ourselves and hopefully create a situation in the Middle East and elsewhere where people, and particularly young people, will have alternative visions and alternative values and alternative opportunities that would lead them away from that type of vicious theology.
Former Ambassador Michael Oren, I do appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much for being on the program.
We will. Thanks.
Here